Have you ever felt like you're constantly apologizing in a relationship, even when you're not sure what you did wrong? You try harder. You communicate better. You become more patient. But somehow the rules keep changing. One day, you're the love of her life. The next, you're selfish, insensitive, or just like everyone else. If this feels familiar, you might not just be in a difficult relationship. You might be dealing with narcissistic dynamics, and here's the hard truth. Loving a narcissistic girlfriend doesn't just drain your energy, it slowly rewires your perception of reality. In today's video, we're going deep into the psychology of narcissism in romantic relationships, not from a place of blame or internet stereotypes, but from a clinical and behavioral understanding. And more importantly, we'll break down exactly how to deal with it in a way that protects your mental health and restores your power. First, let's clarify something important. Narcissism exists on a spectrum. Not everyone who is self-centered or dramatic has narcissistic personality disorder, but certain recurring patterns signal narcissistic traits: lack of empathy, chronic need for validation, entitlement, manipulation, and fragile self-esteem hidden beneath confidence. In romantic relationships, these traits tend to manifest in predictable psychological cycles. At first, there's idealization. She may shower you with affection, admiration, and attention. You feel seen, chosen, even elevated. This phase activates dopamine and attachment chemicals in your brain. You bond quickly, you invest emotionally. Then gradually comes devaluation. Criticism becomes frequent. Your flaws are magnified. Your achievements are minimized. Arguments leave you confused rather than resolved. You start over-explaining yourself. You start walking on eggshells. Psychologically, what's happening here is called intermittent reinforcement, the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. You occasionally receive warmth and affection again, just enough to keep you hooked. Your brain keeps chasing the good version of her that appeared at the beginning. Understanding this cycle is your first step toward regaining control. Now let's talk about what makes dealing with a narcissistic girlfriend so uniquely difficult. Narcissistic traits are often rooted in deep insecurity. Beneath the grandiosity is a fragile self-concept. Criticism feels like annihilation. Accountability feels like humiliation. So instead of processing responsibility, she may project blame outward. If she feels inadequate, suddenly you're not supportive enough. If she feels insecure, you're accused of disloyalty. If she makes a mistake, somehow you caused it. This psychological defense mechanism is called projection. It protects her ego by relocating shame onto you. So how do you deal with this without losing yourself? The first strategy is emotional detachment without emotional coldness. This does not mean becoming distant or cruel. It means recognizing that not every emotional reaction she has requires your emotional absorption. When she lashes out, instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" ask, "What is she protecting in herself right now?" This subtle cognitive shift stops you from automatically internalizing blame. The second strategy is mastering boundaries. Narcissistic dynamics thrive where boundaries are weak. If you over-explain, over-justify, and over-compromise, you unintentionally teach her that emotional escalation gets results. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are calm, consistent limits. For example, instead of arguing for hours to prove your innocence, you might say, "I'm willing to discuss this when we're both calm. I won't continue if I'm being insulted," and then you follow through. The key psychological principle here is behavioral conditioning. When unhealthy behavior stops producing emotional rewards or extended engagement, it gradually weakens. Now here's where many people make a mistake. They believe they can fix her. They think if they love harder, communicate better, or become more patient, the narcissism will dissolve. But personality traits, especially deeply rooted ones, do not change because of external devotion. They change only through self-awareness and voluntary therapeutic work. If she does not recognize her behavior patterns, you cannot force insight into her. The third strategy is resisting the need to win arguments. Narcissistic individuals often argue not to resolve, but to dominate. Logical consistency is less important than emotional superiority. If you approach every disagreement as a courtroom trial, you will exhaust yourself. Instead, shift your goal from winning to observing. Notice patterns. Notice triggers. Notice how conversations loop. When you observe rather than engage, you step out of reactive mode and into strategic awareness. This psychological distance reduces emotional damage. Now let's address something deeper. Why are you staying? This is not a judgmental question, it's a psychological one. Many partners of narcissistic individuals have high empathy, strong tolerance for discomfort, and a desire to heal others. Sometimes there's also an attachment style component. If you have anxious attachment, the intermittent validation feels intoxicating. The emotional roller coaster mimics intensity, and intensity feels like love. Understanding your own attachment style is crucial because dealing with a narcissistic girlfriend is not just about managing her behavior, it's about understanding your vulnerability to the dynamic. If you find yourself constantly trying to earn stability, approval, or reassurance, you may be unconsciously reenacting older emotional patterns. Awareness breaks repetition. The fourth strategy is emotional neutrality during provocations. This technique is sometimes called the grey rock method. When she attempts to provoke jealousy, create drama, or trigger insecurity, respond in a neutral, calm manner, not defensive, not reactive, just steady. Narcissistic behavior feeds on emotional intensity. Remove the intensity and you remove fuel. But here's the nuance most videos don't tell you. Emotional neutrality should not become emotional suppression. If you silence your feelings completely just to keep peace, resentment will accumulate. Yet you still need safe outlets, friends, therapy, journaling, physical activity, somewhere your emotions can be processed. Now let's talk about manipulation tactics you might encounter. Gaslighting is common. This is when your perception of events is denied or distorted. You remember a conversation clearly. She insists it never happened that way. Over time, you begin doubting your memory. To counter this, anchor yourself in objective reality. Write things down, reflect privately before accepting revised narratives. Confidence in your perception protects your cognitive stability. Another tactic is love withdrawal. Affection becomes conditional. Silence becomes punishment. When this happens, resist the impulse to chase. Chasing reinforces the pattern. Instead, maintain your routine. Maintain your self-respect. Emotional independence disrupts control strategies. Now we arrive at the most important question. Can a relationship with a narcissistic girlfriend work? The honest answer is it depends on self-awareness and willingness to change. If she acknowledges harmful patterns and actively works on them, especially with professional help, improvement is possible. But if denial is persistent and accountability is absent, the dynamic will likely repeat. And this leads to the final, uncomfortable truth. Sometimes the healthiest way to deal with a narcissistic partner is to leave, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of self-preservation. Chronic exposure to narcissistic dynamics can erode self-esteem, increase anxiety, and even create trauma responses. Your nervous system remains in hypervigilance. You start monitoring tone, mood shifts, subtle cues. That is not sustainable long-term. Leaving requires courage because narcissistic relationships often create trauma bonds. The highs and lows form powerful neurological attachments. Breaking that bond can feel like withdrawal, but withdrawal is temporary. Identity erosion is not. Before making any major decision, assess three things honestly. Is there consistent accountability? Is there measurable behavioral change? And are you becoming a smaller version of yourself? If the answer to the last question is yes, that's your signal. Dealing with a narcissistic girlfriend is not about outsmarting her. It's about strengthening yourself. Boundaries, emotional regulation, self-awareness, detachment from validation. When you stop trying to manage her ego and start protecting your own mental clarity, the entire dynamic shifts. Either she adapts to your healthier framework or the incompatibility becomes undeniable. And that clarity, even if painful, is power. If this video resonated with you, it might mean you're starting to see patterns more clearly. Awareness is the first step out of confusion. This is Psychology Threads, where we untangle the patterns shaping your relationships and your mind. And remember, love should expand your identity, not shrink it.